Welcome to this Bennett Explains finance video. This week, why LIBOR is making headlines yet again. Now, some interesting quotes from the recent prosecutions, both led by the American and the UK regulators. Come on, we always need higher LIBORs, haha. That was a direct quote from one trading desk at a big bank. Boys, well done, top work. And we delivered. I don't want to kiss, I just take a beer. Now, all sounds very clubby and chummy. Clearly, something dodgy is going on. What is the question? Now, the newspapers have picked this all up again. Ex-Barclays workers accused of LIBOR fix, said the BBC News recently. Barclays traders nobbled LIBOR, said the Times recently. And the offence is no different from stealing, said one SFO prosecutor. So, what is LIBOR? How can it be rigged? And why is that such a big problem? Now, which rate are we talking about, first of all? I'm not talking here about the Bank of England's bank rate, what used to be called the base rate. All right, we'll leave that to one side. What I'm talking about is a rate that's determined by commercial lenders. In the London market is the London Interbank Offered Rate. So it's determined by banks between each other. And it's a vital rate because trillions of sterling and dollars worth of contracts are linked to it. It's a variable interest rate and it pins, basically acts as the benchmark for loads of other variable rates that are out there in the market which underpin massive, massive volumes of contracts. So, the question then becomes, how can it be set and how can it be fixed? Well, to use a bit of artistic license, just to simplify very slightly so you get the picture, imagine you've got a panel of 16 banks, all London-based banks, let's say. You ask them to submit an estimate of what they think the other banks on the panel would charge them to borrow over, let's say, a 3-month period in dollars. And all those 16 bids come in, and the other banks in theory don't know what the other bids are going to be. They put an honest assessment in of what they think that rate should be. And let's imagine, hypothetically speaking, Bank 1 bids 1%, Bank 2, 2%, Bank 3, 3%, all the way up to Bank 15, 15%, Bank 16, 16%. Now, totally unrealistic rates in the real world, but just to illustrate. What next? So you've got the 16 bids in, the top 4 and the bottom 4 disappear, and you average the middle 8. If you average the middle 8, you get around 8.5%, and that would become the snapshot published rate, then the whole thing's going to be done again tomorrow morning. So that's today's LIBOR rate. And the point is, as a variable rate, it changes. Now, just a few details, and then we'll look at how it can be fixed. So, what's going on here? The rates submitted are estimates of what each bank thinks it would pay to borrow from the other banks, and in theory, they're independent estimates. There's supposed to be no collusion. That's important. Bids actually come in across a range of currencies and over different maturities, anything from overnight to 12 months. There are lots of different LIBOR rates being calculated daily, but the one that often hits the headlines is the 3-month dollar LIBOR, simply because huge volumes of contracts are actually pinned to that rate. Now, the question's going to arise, how can you fix it? And bear in mind that this process I've mentioned, and summarised rather briefly, is repeated at places like the European Central Bank, just using different numbers of banks and a slightly different process. Now, let's go back to how could it be fixed? Okay, imagine for a moment that banks 7, 8 and 9 collude, and rather than submitting bids, as we might expect, of 7, 8 and 9%, that was example 1, they decide actually they're going to bid LIBOR up by submitting bids of 17, 18 and 19 respectively. How does that change the picture? Well, you've now got all your 16 bids in again. Take off the bottom and top 4, looks like that. Average the middle 8, and suddenly you've got a rate of 10.75%. LIBOR has jumped because those banks submitted artificial bids, if you like. Who's that going to suit? Well, winners are going to include anyone with a position that's based on LIBOR rising, that profits of LIBOR rises, basically. So, variable rate lenders could benefit, but more importantly, your mates, if you're responsible for submitting the bid on behalf of a bank, if you like, your mates on a trading desk that trades interest rate-based products, like swaps, for example, they could suddenly be cheering because they made a decent profit. And equally, people at other banks won't be cheering because there'll be people out there who are variable rate borrowers. High LIBOR is bad for them. It means their loans cost more money, if you like, and there'll be people trading on the basis of LIBOR falling, and they'll be the big losers. So there are commercially winners and losers from a LIBOR fix. And on top of that, the problem is that LIBOR is such a heavily watched rate. It underpins such big values of contracts in the financial markets that if there's a suspicion it's dodgy, basically the whole credibility of financial markets could fall apart. And that's why regulators are going after people accused of rigging it. Any questions? editor@killick.com.